Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We got a little 2-for-1 here. We were planning on doing a little Oregon preview to the 2023 season, and coincidentally, Oregon lands another commitment on the 2023 trail, and Kingston Lopa, a 4-star safety from the state of California. You look at this kid's offer list. I mean, SEC schools, USC was in it. There were a lot of programs after Kingston Lopa's commitment. He ends up going to the Oregon Ducks, and Oregon hasn't been the flashiest team on the recruiting trail, but they're building a very, very solid class. Number 6 in the country. They have targets for Brandon Baker, 5-star offensive tackle from Mater Dei, Aiden Breland, a 5-star defensive lineman from Mater Dei, Elijah Rushing from the state of Arizona. Oregon could finish with a top 5 class, and I don't think that's absolutely crazy to say. Dan Lanning, bringing the SEC Georgia level recruiting to the Oregon Ducks. I think the Ducks fans have a lot to be excited about. We're going to talk a little Kingston Lopa. We're also going to talk and take a look at this Oregon team and how it's going to look in 2023. Now, before we do, again, just want to say thank you for all you guys just tuning in, checking us out. We love talking recruiting. You guys have shown a ton of support, especially the Ducks fans. Again, we've been talking a lot of Oregon football, so if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's talk a little Kingston Lopa and what Dan Lanning's doing on the recruiting trail, and then we'll get into this Oregon team heading into 2023 here.
And this is what Kirby Smart said in his post-game interview after the Bulldogs blew the doors off Oregon. He said Dan's a great coach. He needs to get his guys. He just doesn't have the players that Georgia had, and you could kind of see that. So that's at the end of the day what Dan Lanning needs to do at this Oregon program to bridge the gap is bring in the guys who are deciding between them, USC, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, those big dogs of college football.
Yeah, and Oregon's been cleaning up in the West Coast. I mean, like taking a lot of top kids from the state of California. You can tell Dan Lanning is taking that. I think a lot of Oregon fans were nervous that Mario Cristobal leaves and is the recruiting going to take a little turn. Mario Cristobal, phenomenal recruiter, player development, in-game coaching, some question marks there. Dan Lanning picking right off where Mario Cristobal left off, and I think you're even seeing him kind of breach into more SEC territory, going to the state of Texas and landing some commits too. If you're a top defensive player, Dan Lanning has a proven track record in developing guys on the defensive side of the ball and putting them in the NFL. And you can see a lot of guys being attracted to this Oregon Ducks program. To talk a little Kingston Lopa, you're getting a 6'5" cornerback who is extremely rangy and a relatively smooth mover. But what you're going to get is a guy that can play the football in the air. He's got good range, and he's got long arms to get in passing lanes. And I think Dan Lanning and how he wants to play, I think is going to benefit from a safety who can go play the football. You want to have more turnovers. Kingston Lopa is a guy that I think can create some more turnovers. So, again, Oregon just continuing to build a very strong class in 2024. But, Dill, I want to turn our attention to how this Oregon Ducks team can really make some noise in 2023. A really good first year under Dan Lanning. I think we've talked a lot about USC and how excited we are for this USC team. If there is another team in the Pac-12 that I think can make some noise on the national level, it is this Oregon Ducks team.
And that's because at least the Oregon Ducks can keep up with them moving the football. That's going to be the key to dealing with USC is you got to score pretty much every time you touch it. And USC probably not going to be the greatest defense in the world. They might be better than they were last year, but you're not expecting to see peak Georgia defense coming out of Southern California.
I would not. You're not expecting that, certainly.
But what Oregon has is they're going to have an offensive attack they're going to be able to put points on.
I think so much hype in USC's offense. That's awesome, but not enough talk is around how good this Oregon offense is. Not only Bo Nix, but the playmakers around him. Dan Lanning did a nice job, and it's kind of rare to see coaches do a really good job in the transfer portal and also on the high school recruiting trail. I think Dan Lanning is doing a masterful job balancing getting high school talent in to develop, but also getting your team better for 2023 in the transfer portal. I think Dan Lanning absolutely crushed it. And you start with Bo Nix. I don't get I think Bo Nix can take another step. You saw Bo Nix take a massive step the first time playing with some good wide receivers and a good offensive line. He did not get that at Auburn. The minute he took snaps behind that Oregon offensive line with some good playmakers on the outside, you saw the best version of Bo Nix, and I don't think it's crazy to see another step from Bo Nix and kind of solidify himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
And especially hitting that deep ball. Like, you just didn't see him miss those throws. Like, if Troy
Yes.
Franklin had a step, he was not missed that often. And that, I mean, that's a huge part of, like, you see so many quarterbacks. I mean, you think about like what Michigan has at times with JJ, just missing those plays that go seven points in one play. You just saw Bo Nix, he didn't miss those throws. And again, you always kind of knew he had that athleticism and playmaking ability. But at Oregon, you saw him take that jump to, like, man, if he's got a wide out open, he's putting it on him and they're going to go for 6.
Yeah, Bo Nix was phenomenal, and if he can stay healthy, I mean, it's certainly a Heisman contender. And I think this passing attack or this pass catching group for Oregon. And yeah, again, I don't mean to like talk about USC, but a lot of the hype goes to how good USC's wide receivers are. I think Troy Franklin, if you guys check out my NFL draft stuff, like I've been talking about Troy Franklin being a top 20 pick. Like he does not get nearly enough credit for being one of the best wide receivers in the country going into his third year, building that chemistry with Bo Nix. I think Troy Franklin is primed for 1,200 plus yards this year. I truly think in this offense, he's going to put up some numbers. And then outside of Troy Franklin, you go and get Tez Johnson from the transfer portal. Chris Hudson, a lot of optimism around him. Trayshawn Holden as well. Even Jerrion Dickey coming in as a true freshman, former 5-star receiver coming out of high school. Bo Nix is going to be surrounded by electric pass catchers.
I think people sleep so much on Chris Hudson because, like, yeah, Troy Franklin gets the buzz and Trayshawn Holden coming in and Tez Johnson coming in the portal. Obviously, they get their hype.
Yeah.
But Chris Hudson's been kind of doing this thing since he was a freshman now at Oregon. And again, more of that possession wideout who can take the football and make plays with it when it gets in his hands. And that's Troy Franklin's game is he's got mega burners. He gets downfield, makes his plays. But Chris Hudson, I think, complements him well in terms of, like, you can throw it to him in the backfield and just ultra skilled in that realm of football. So I think he got a really well balanced receiver room. Again, Chris Hudson, people sleep. I just think they sleep on him so much. It's like the guy's been killing it since freshman year.
Yeah, and even Terrence Ferguson at the tight end spot, a quality pass catcher. In Oregon, I mean, they ran the football at a very, very effective level last year. They got a bunch of good running backs. Bucky Irvin coming over from Minnesota, Noah Whittington, 2 really quality backs. I think the bigger question is the offensive line. You lose a lot of talent to the NFL draft. That being said, it could go one of 2 ways. I think there's a very probable world where this offensive line is even better than it was last year.
I'm not gonna lie. When you go back to like 2022, like I think their offensive line came in with a lot of hype, had been a lot of experience and all that. I feel like when you watch them, they were good, but they weren't like the most dominant unit of all time. And you saw that bear out in the NFL draft. Like their guys were not going as high picks. And again, they'd played a ton of football. They didn't make a ton of mistakes, but they were not a dominant unit that, again, like just could go up and maul teams. This unit now, what they have is just some ultra talent. That's something I don't think they've had in the past couple of years. Especially wasn't that.
That's kind of what I mean. Is like you had not a lot of question marks about that offensive line coming into last year because this was a bunch of proven starters, and that group was going to be good. There might be some growing pains because you do have some question marks at the tackle position. That being said, those question marks could be real answers at that tackle. I mean, Josh Connolly, a former 5-star recruit, he could be the best tackle that Oregon's seen since Penei Sewell. And then on the other side of Johnny Cornelius coming from Rhode Island, a guy that every single Power 5 team in the country wanted him. You have bookend tackles that, yes, they have. I mean, Johnny Cornelius hasn't played at the FBS level. Josh Conley hasn't played a ton of football as a second-year guy.
But every school in the country wanted those two, so there's something there. It's like, what is
exactly
missing it or stupid? Like
kind of getting to the point where like this group could, like the potential is, I think it could be a better offensive line than we saw last year.
Well, yeah, because you might have some like legit high picks in this group of guys versus last year. Again, really solid group of players. And to get Jackson Powers Johnson back and be that rock of the unit, who, again, been there for a long time, played good football, I think is huge because again, you are bringing in now a fairly new crop, but you got your center in place, or if he plays guard, it is what it is. But you got one guy is going to kind of be a rock.
Yeah, this offensive line kind of excites me. And that it's a very, very – I think that's kind of the story of the season. Like, I think you know what you have in Bo Nix if you can give him protection in a run game. I think you know what you have at your pass catchers. You know what you have in your running backs. If this offensive line can give Bo Nix that protection, can establish the run to work play action. That's when you saw Bo Nix at its best. It was work and play action. That's when I think this offense could even take a step from what you saw last year with Coach Will Stein. Now, the defensive side of the ball, this is where I'm really optimistic. And if we're talking about Oregon making the college football playoffs, being one of the best teams in the country, this defense needs to take some steps. They brought in a ton of transfers to do so. You have arguably the best defensive-minded head coach in the country in Dan Lanning. Still, starting with this front seven, I think this could be a massively improved group.
And this will be an interesting group. You look, this is a big physical group. Like, they don't have a ton of your traditional pass rushers. Now, Mesa Funa, that's kind of his game to an extent. But you look, those starting four are big players. Jordan Birch and Brandon Dorlus are big physical defensive ends. They're not like those premier get on the edge and do their thing, but they're both very disruptive in the run game and are pocket pushers. But you kind of said it. Like, this unit needs, in my opinion, needs to be just better. They need to take their steps and be more dominant if Dan Lanning's going to do what he wants to do.
And I think it could be. I mean, Jordan Birch is a dude that I could certainly see being a first-round draft pick if Dan Lanning and that staff can unlock what he's capable of. Again, former top 10 national dude. I also think they got a little bit deeper as well. I mean, I really like Casey Rogers inside. Brandon Dorlus is a dude that could move inside and out, but two really heavy-handed edge rushers. And then Mateo Yu, like he's going to play. He's got the body to play early, and I think he is going to play early. And then going to the linebacker spot, you lose Noah Sewell, you lose Justin Flo, and two guys that former 5 stars underperformed. I think I'm interested, Oregon fans. Justin Flo for sure underperformed. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Noah Sewell, because going back and watching some tape for the NFL draft, it seemed like Noah Sewell wasn't exactly as dominant as I was really expecting when I dug back into it. This linebacker room, I think, could get a lot better, right? Jeffrey Bassett, Justin Jacobs coming over from Iowa, I really, really like. And you're moving Jamal Hill down from that safety spot to that linebacker spot. You talk about the biggest problem with Noah Sewell was playing in space. And Jamal Hill, having been that safety, is coming now into the box more and being a linebacker that can handle space a little bit more. When you're asking to carry tight ends up the seam, he can do that. When you're asking to tackle running backs in the flat, I think he can do that. I'm very interested to see how that move works out, because I think that could end up making that linebacker core a little bit better.
Yeah, and I want to see what Jeffrey Bassett can do. It's obviously played sparingly to an extent last year, as not sparingly, but he wasn't the full-time starter. He played a lot because those two, especially Justin Flo, weren't always playing. But like a guy who, again, a true sophomore last year, I thought played good football, but like if he just kind of plays a little faster and more, I don't know, confidently, whatever you say it, but more experienced. He's a guy who he's big, he's a long guy, he's really athletic. If he can take that jump and be that guy and pair up with Justin Jacobs, again, another long athletic linebacker, I think you could see something special out of this unit. Because again, you mentioned last year we thought that was going to be an incredible unit, but when you are on the field, they were not a dominant group.
It wasn't what we were. I remember 12 months ago, we're talking about this linebacker duo.
You got 2 first rounders.
Potentially being the best in college football, and it just significantly underperformed. And working to the back end, that's probably where the biggest question marks are. It's a group that struggled giving up the big play last year. And you lose a guy like Christian Gonzalez, which obviously hurts. He was my number 1 cornerback in the NFL draft. That being said, watching some of the Oregon games back, kind of prepping for this, it did seem like there was a lot more of a communication problem than it was like not having the personnel to make it happen. And what they do is go into the transfer portal and get some guys that I'm very interested to see, right? Kyrie Jackson, no doubt Dan Lanning recruited him coming out of JUCO when he was at Georgia. He ends up going to Alabama. When he hits the portal again, Dan Lanning pounces on him. That got wrapped up quickly. Kyrie Jackson at the portal, Dan Lanning brought him in very, very quickly. Evan Williams, a very experienced safety, which I think is going to be massive. And then Tashim Johnson also coming in. They kind of revamped with some experience in the back end that I think will really help. From a down-to-down basis, I don't think this group was horrible. That being said, giving up the amount of explosive plays that they did, it cost them.
I mean, because even against Washington, they played pretty solid for the most part, but they gave up like 3-4 big ones. And then
can't have it.
You do that, it's like what happened to Ohio State against Michigan. It's like I know, and as a Michigan fan, I like to get on Jim Knowles and say he's a bad coordinator and so forth. But that defense was really good in that game. They just had 5 horrific plays. But
Very similar
that
story.
matters. That's like people who say that, like, well, that can't happen. It's like that's what separates good defenses from average defenses. Like,
And it wasn't just a problem in the Washington game. That's where it kind of reared its ugly head. But it was a problem all year, giving up those big plays. And if you can limit that, because again, down to down basis, like a very efficient and solid secondary, I thought it just giving up those big plays. You can play 4 great plays and then give up a 70-yard touchdown, and it counts for nothing. You have to avoid the big play. And the other element of this, the other part of the equation is checking out this schedule. I like this Oregon schedule. You look at their road games, on the road at Washington, Utah, you got to win those games, but you get USC at home. Taking a look at this schedule, on the road at Washington, on the road at Utah, and then USC, those are the games that you're taking a look at. And saying,
what's nice about that is they don't have back-to-back brutal looks. It's like Washington comes after Stanford, USC comes after
bye week.
It's like they just kind of come after. Okay, you can kind of look at. I don't want to say look ahead, but like they're going to beat Cal unless they play a real stinker. They're going to beat Stanford unless they play a real stinker. It's
they could play.
They don't run into like some 3-week back-to-back like Cal, USC or USC, Stanford, or USC, Utah, someone else. It's not what they're.
And the Pac-12 is loaded. Like me and you had the discussion. And you kind of disagreed, but I'm saying like with the quality of quarterback play that you're gonna see in the Pac-12, like you do have to bring your A game. Like Washington State with Cameron Ward, like Cameron Ward has a very high ceiling in terms of quarterback play. You better make sure you take care of your business. One other game I'd want to note on the road at Texas Tech, it is very hard to go on the road and win in Lubbock. And you're playing Tyler Shock, former Oregon guy.
Rocking there.
That's the game that you don't want to overlook. I'm not picking Texas Tech to win that game because I'm very high on this Oregon Ducks team. But, man, that is a game that if you're an Oregon fan, like, don't overlook that Texas Tech team. But outside of that, like, the three money games. And outside of on the road at Washington and on the road at Utah and in USC, Oregon State I should probably add. That helps getting them at home. I should give Oregon State some respect, too. And that, I think, just goes to tell you how loaded the Pac-12 is. Like, it's with how good these quarterbacks are. Like, you do have to bring your A game every single week. But this Oregon Ducks team, from a roster development standpoint, I think is one of the more complete teams, not only in the Pac-12 in the country. If they stay healthy and play a little bit more disciplined football, this is a team that I think can make some noise, not only in the Pac-12, but on a national level. Pac-12's back, though. As East Coast boys, like, late night Pac-12 is going to be an absolute blast. I will not be going to sleep before 1 a.m. Like, I'm going to be watching a lot of Pac-12 football this year. It was kind of a down couple of years. Maybe last year was decent, but going back, like, it was kind of some down years. This Pac-12 schedule is going to be an absolute blast.
The problem is, like, no disrespect to Utah, but when Utah's the best, they don't bring the same national juice as Oregon and USC. Like, that's just the fact of the matter is those teams are national brands. They love them or hate them kind of teams. I mean, I think a lot of people really hate USC. A lot of people, the people who love USC love them, and probably same goes for Oregon. Based on what was going on.
100% agree. Utah is not a team that I'm like, all
right,
not
polarizing like that.
I got to get a cup of coffee in me at 10 p.m. to watch this Utah game. I probably just try to stay up, fall asleep.
I'll just get up and be a hater about it. Oh, I hate this team. They're so good. Whatever.
If Oregon is playing at 10, like, I'm watching these games. These games are very, very exciting. Want to wrap it up there. Again, appreciate you guys checking us out. Gave you guys some updates on what Oregon is doing on the recruiting trail, but wanted to talk this Oregon team heading into 2023. Appreciate you guys checking out the fellas. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.